If I were giving this video presentation 5-10 years ago, it'd look a lot different than what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be talking about 21st century scientific literature and how to appropriately assess it and accept certain limitations. So this is what we do in public health. It's becoming more and more important as more research is published and more research becomes available via the open access model, that we have the ability to understand the difference between credible research as well as misinformation hiding under the auspice of peer-reviewed research. For your first assignment, you're going to be relying on some of the information provided in this video. So let's first jump right into the different types of literature that are out there. There's articles, books, and gray literature. In this class and in your career, as you develop maybe research grant proposals or as you document things as part of your job, if you have to write technical reports, often the gold standard of which we use and judge our citations that we would probably want to use, the gold standard is often the peer-reviewed journal articles. Again, the quality of peer review, the quality of that journal matters. We're going to discuss that more in this video. Magazines and newspapers are helpful for communicating information to the general public. You're going to have a master's degree in public health, so you're a little different than the general public in this regard as it relates to public health information and public health research. Books are sometimes helpful, but they often don't occupy the majority of the space in a background or a discussion section of a public health research document or grant application. Gray literature can be beneficial if a government agency has issued a technical report. Some government agencies take advantage of the open access model so that they can make the information publicly available. They once were not able to do that. They used to have to put it through a peer review process, and then the taxpayers may have to pay to read the peer review article. That's changed. So a lot of gray literature, or what was historically gray literature, is now able to find its way into the peer-reviewed journals, increasing the quality of the publications. Government documents still exist, though, in some cases. So you may use them. Conference proceedings, policy, white papers, and things that have not went through the thorough peer review process, they're not journal articles. They're still gray literature. Some government documents go through agency peer review, but unless they occur in a peer-reviewed journal article, we will still treat them as gray literature. So there's a lot more on this topic. Different places have got information out there on black versus white, on the articles. Why this is called gray literature, you can kind of research the backstory on that. It's just the lexicon that I'm comfortable using. So, public health research. If you're looking at peer-reviewed journal articles, like this particular article in the Journal of Science Total Environment, this is kind of the gold standard type of article. You know, that journal, sometimes it's given the acronym STOTN. That's a totally acceptable peer-reviewed journal article with a rigorous peer review process. Government documents like these two government documents, these would be considered gray literature, and they may have helpful information. This particular one actually had a lot of information in it, and it never was peer reviewed, and had it actually been able to be submitted to a journal, the quality of the information in there would have likely been peer reviewed and accepted for publication. Now, as the open access model has gained traction, government scientists have an obligation to make their information publicly available. How do they make government information publicly available if you submit it to a journal that's got a paywall that would make it harder for people to access? Well, preprints are allowed to be published. So if you were to find an article like this one, and then you find it on Google Scholar, and you click on the HTML link to nih.gov, that's naturalinstitutesofhealth.gov, it sends us here. And this particular article exists here on a government kind of website here. The NIH has this website through the National Library of Medicine, and I can see on this website that I can click on PDF and I can get a copy of this article. It's not going to look exactly like it does in the Journal of Stoughton, Science of the Total Environment, right? It's not going to look the same way, but all the text and all the data and everything is still there. So you would have public access to this information. It may not look as pretty, but it's there. So that's a very great benefit of living now in the 21st century rather than when I went to school, where if the government published something like this in that journal, you would have to be at a library that was paying for that subscription, or you'd have to pay for the article yourself. So we're seeing more and more movement towards open access models, and there's pros and cons to that. So open access models of publishing means that we can potentially serve more people. So a tremendous amount of tax dollars fund research. So ethically, morally, should that research be available to the taxpayers? Most people would argue yes. In the United States, this has been battled in court, and the answer is yes. But what impact does open access publishing have on the world? So there's a lot of these big publishing houses: Pergamon Press, Elsevier, Springer Nature, Taylor & Francis, Oxford, Cambridge, MDPI, ACS. All these are just some of the major publishing houses. And then there's this newer one called Hindawi Press, which is, I'm not going to discuss it too much right now, but all of them are dealing with this. Some are embracing it fully. Almost all of them now embrace it because it's the world that they're going to have to live in. So we'll describe this, the pros and cons here more. So what does open access mean? Well, it means that anyone in the world with web access can theoretically access the information. So if you have a computer or even a mobile phone or smartphone, right? If you can access the web, you can access an open access research article. So if you're a researcher or if you're a publisher, if you are able to get your article published in an open access journal, it means that more people may discover it, and as a consequence, more people may cite it. More citations presumably means more prestige and greater impact from that article. Same thing for the publishing house. Whichever publisher it is, if more of their research articles from their journal or their journals are getting cited more because more people have access to them, that also means more index citations and more prestige for the journal. So it's important for journals to be able to operate in this space. And if a journal wants to publish U.S. government-funded research, the journal likely has to provide an open access means for doing so. But there's a new business model in town too. This open access model gives scavengers and predatory journals a space to operate in. So if you've got marginal research information, or you've not done research at all and you're trying to do something that's questionable, there are scavengers out there willing to take lower quality research or take research that doesn't merit publication at all, and they're willing to publish it. You give them the money, they publish it. We'll talk about that more in a few minutes. So, assumptions for journals. So when you hear about a peer-reviewed journal or you hear about an academic journal, the assumption is the peer review process is rigorous. My question for you is, are all journals equal in this regard? Is the level of peer review for one journal the same as another journal? Also, in terms of the content of what's published in one journal, is it the same in terms of quality from one journal to the next? Some journals may permit a bad article to slip through the peer review process. It's not the journal, the peer reviewers let it slip through. Some journals may let a lot more slip through. Some journals may do a very good job stopping any from getting through. This is a clip from an Elsevier webpage. This is a cartoon from a scientist kind of taking a jab at the peer-reviewed process. Elsevier journals, generally speaking, have a pretty high bar for peer review. So it says most scientists regarded the new streamlined peer review process as quite an improvement. And you can see the gauntlet this person has to run through to get their paper accepted. Recently, I submitted an article to the journal Preventive Medicine Reports. That particular article had 5 peer reviewers, all of whom gave it a thorough assessment. Some journals may only have 2 peer reviewers, and they may not give a lot of critique. That particular journal, Preventive Medicine Reports, has a very high bar. So it's understandable that I had to go through, and I'm still going through that gauntlet for that article. But the journals that really want to make money off of publishing more and more stuff online, regardless of quality, offer the pay-to-play publishing model. You want to take garbage and publish it. If you pay the price, you can get it published. The good thing about the pay-for-play journals, or the bad thing, I don't know, they don't usually cost as much. So sometimes it's only $150 or $200, and they'll publish whatever you want them to publish. And they're smart. They either have bought old journal names from famous journals that didn't know to trademark or copyright their name, or they've created fancy names of their own, like International Journal of Advanced Medical Technology. I'm just making them up, that term. There may not be a journal called that, but they do that. I'm going to give you an example of one here in a few minutes. So what makes a journal have a good reputation? So the New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet, American Journal of Public Health, Journal of the American Medical Association, Environmental Health Perspectives, Science. These are some of the top journals publishing information related to public health, and publishing, in some cases, science information in general. So science, they publish physics, they publish everything. Nature, they publish a lot on biology, diversity of life, new drugs, medicine. A lot of these journals, these big journals, do multiple things. And then there's different journals. There's journals that are still reputable, but not as kind of reputable. You know what I'm saying? So there's like the #1 journals in the world, and then there are journals that are really good in their profession and leaders in their profession, and then there are journals that I haven't listed up here that are absolute rubbish, that you may not want to be associated with at all, that might be those predatory journals. So we'll cover them in a second. So what influences reputation? So the journals that are publishing the most impactful, most meaningful stuff, in many cases the researchers that are publishing in those journals got lucky in some cases. They were among a vast group of scientists working on a very important topic, and that topic was of great interest to the world or to society. So that added value to it. And then they also had access to money or resources, or had an experimental design or study design that was very good. They may have cost a lot of money to do it, and they may have grant dollars to fund that. But regardless, the quality of the work being published in those journals is presumably of high impact. And articles that are of high impact get cited a lot. So that's how we know it's a high impact article. It's cited by other researchers a whole lot. There are different ways of assessing whether a journal is a good journal from an impact point of view. So there are journal impact factors like Clarivate Analytics. They're associated with like the Web of Science. It's a certain group, and they've been publishing JCR impact factors for probably couple decades maybe. So accessing these impact factor scores is a little more challenging. Sometimes they cost money and they're behind paywalls. We'll look and see what we can do. All right, there's Elsevier, the publishing house, has their own journal and country-based ranking report. There's SNPs. And then there's Google's H5 index, which you have access to, anyone in the world does, through Google Journal Metrics. There are faux or fake impact factors that exist out there. This particular article in the American Journal of Medicine was talking about fraud in academic publishing, researchers under cyber attacks. In the actual article, they mention all these misleading or fake metrics. A lot of people know that, like, hey, an academic at some universities and even in some research institutions, they have to have so many publications in a journal with an impact over a certain score. So it's important to have a higher impact. So what do you do when you don't have a high impact, or you're not even ranked in one of these because your articles are junk articles going to a junk predatory journal? So how do the predatory journals make themselves look legitimate? Well, they publish fake impact factors. And there are entities out there, these are just a list of some of them, that will produce bogus or misleading metrics. And we're going to go through a few examples here in a few minutes. Yale, their library, they've got this website here on where their faculty should be looking at potentially publishing research, or their doctoral students. Where should you be publishing your research? And they warn people to click on some of these lists before you send something off to a journal. So it's a journal you've never heard of. Do your homework. All right? You're going to want to do your homework because there's a lot of suspicious journals, and it's increasing. Like every day, there's more and more of them. These things are getting created all the time. So I'm going to pull up some applied examples here. So I'm going to end this show, and I'm going to pull over some websites that I got here for you. All right, so here's a particular journal. This is called the International Journal of Advanced Computer Technology. Now, with respect to this journal, about 5 years ago, the journal accepted a bogus paper. They paid the fee, and that's what the paper was. And it's got nice figures and everything in it. So no journal in their right mind would accept that article under the idea that it's science, right? I mean, look at the foul language. That alone would have been enough to raise a red flag. And the title of it is, you know, get me off your mailing list. I can pull up my quarantine. I've got one already pulled up. I get so many of these emails. Brain disorders. This fake journal from the Scientific Diaries publishing house related to cancer. This one, cardiology at OA Text Journal. So let's look at cardiology. Integrative cardiology. And then it gives me this bogus impact factor of 1.54. I know it's bogus because I've looked it up. I can click on the PubMed information here that's trying to make it look more legit. When I do, or when I open this up, which I'll do, what do we see about this particular journal? This Journal of Integrative Cardiology. It was indexed at some point, but PubMed, selected citations only. It doesn't take everything because it's shady. It's not in the National Library of Medicine collection. It's not indexed. Why isn't it indexed? Well, I would imagine it's not currently indexed in Medline or anything because at some point, maybe these articles from this journal, publication start year 2015, you know, I'm not for sure why it's not indexed. They might be curious about it. It might be suspicious. When I look at that actual index, whatever that they gave me for their journal, when they say they're 1.54, and I look at how that was determined, it says it's based on Google search and Google Scholar citations. I go to journal metrics for Google Scholar, and I type in this particular journal, and it's not going to be there. Actually, I'll just type in integrative cardiology. But we have to go to journal metrics, and then on journal metrics, integrative cardiology. We search that term. It doesn't match any publications. I can search cardiology and get all kinds of things. I don't see integrative cardiology anywhere. How they determine that, I have no clue. But there's probably a reason why they're sending me an email that Microsoft has determined is something that needs to be quarantined because it's spam. So these entities are out there. I'm sure I could look at that journal a little bit more in depth. We can go figure out, you know, this integrative journal of cardiology, what it costs. This one, International Journal of Advanced Computer Technology, they're the ones who publish the Get Me Off Your Effing Mailing List. It gives you all this author preparation stuff. Somewhere it gives us a fee, publication fee. The publication fee, it's $150. Extra page charges $10. Not very expensive in the grand scheme of things. If you were to look at some other journals, Other journals, these typically cost a lot more. International Journal of Environmental Health, or International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, they have an article processing fee called APCs. If we were to look at what this costs in domestic or in the United States, it costs 2,300 Swiss francs. I don't know what that is. It's probably like 3,000 US dollars. So a lot more expensive. So who gets to publish in that? It's going to be more of the wealthier countries and people with more access to money. This journal, though, does have hardship opportunities, so if people have questions about it, they can apply or petition if they're from a country with low resources to try to get that rate reduced. That's just a little bit of information about what's out there. If you're looking at some other, journals that might be predatory, you can actually search Beall's list. You can see, it's a very, very, very long list. And this list continues to grow. And some groups, I'm sure, have probably sued them. International Journal of Advanced Computing Technology, I wonder if it's actually on here. I don't see it, but that's just one of many, so this is all good information for your assignment. In the next video, I'm going to show you how you can use Google Scholar metrics as part of your assignment. And not all open access is necessarily a bad thing. It's giving more people access to information than at any time in history. But how we use that information, how we discern from junk and marginal and good and excellent, is something that not only understanding journal metrics is something that can be helpful, but also understanding how to read the paper the same way a peer reviewer would. Those are all factors that we're going to consider. So I'm going to stop this video here. In the next video, we're going to look at journal metrics and how to do your first assignment.